Hi, I'm Allison Cunningham, and I am one of the owners at TalentSpark. I am joined here with two of our employees to talk about our current recruiting status and what you can do, our recruiting survival guide. So joined with me today, I have Jamie Brajcich, who is responsible for our executive and professional searches, and Dax Wandling, who is responsible for our RPO, which if you don't know what that means, it's our interim recruiting support team that works with companies to provide interim recruiting on the in-house side. So I'm going to walk them through some of the things that are going on today, and I'll let them give you their expertise from what they see in the market. So maybe to kick off, we've had a lot of changes, particularly I've been in recruiting for over 15 years, and I'm not sure that I've ever seen the speed of changes that have happened in the last kind of 2 to 3 years, particularly post-COVID. But to ground everybody, let's go back to kind of get oriented of where we were, what happened during COVID, and where are we now? Could you walk us through that, Dax?
Yeah. So, looking back to late 2019 and early 2020, the economy was just on fire, right? Unemployment in Idaho, at least, hovering right around 3%, which is significantly below full employment. People were hiring, compensation was going up. Like it was just a good time to be a professional, whatever your profession was. It was a good time. And then we know that it just ground to a halt. Like there was everything shut down, literally and figuratively, and that really kind of stayed the same for about 3 months. Most of Q2 2020 felt pretty dead. We saw that at TalentSpark. It's just not much happened. And then around June, things started to pick back up. And we've kind of been going up and down over the last year or so. I think there was a lot of optimism around the summertime. And so especially late Q1, Q2 of 21, more hiring started, and it's been kind of a good time to be looking for a job, not necessarily a good time to be hiring for a job quickly, at least.
That is. Yeah. What did we hear recently that some of the last unemployment numbers, that there were 27,000 people on unemployment? And I think I've heard a little bit, if we ended unemployment or if everyone went back to work, then we would solve sort of this issue, in there. And I think recently they found that there's over 80,000 positions posted, in the state of Idaho, so that we have this huge gap between the number of available employees and roles that are out there. And Dex, I think you make such an interesting point about the number of people that left the job market that aren't on unemployment, that haven't returned. In there, I think we've seen some big changes in that space.
Yeah, but still not huge changes. It's still, the labor participation rate is still something around like 61%. And March of 2020, it was like 63%. It's not that very many people have dropped out. So I think you make a good point, Allie, that even if everyone that we want to have a job had one, there would still be job openings.
Yeah. Interesting. So we've got this really, really tight market where there's more jobs than people in there. Jamie, talk to us a little bit about, what are some of the biggest changes that we've seen since COVID? COVID sort of changed the landscape of a lot of things in there. What are you seeing from both the candidates and employers in the last 18 months, particularly in the last year?
Yeah, no, as everyone's aware, there's been so much change over the last 18 months that everyone's kind of having to rethink about things, and hiring candidates is definitely one of them. We've seen more of a global market, a global workforce. So what that really means is that people can be located really anywhere and work for companies, throughout the United States or, even global, actually. So that means that the market's a little bit tighter, because not only are these candidates able to work anywhere, but they're able to find jobs anywhere. So we're not just competing against people in Idaho. We're not competing against businesses in Idaho. We're now competing against kind of more of that national market, which I think is really important to keep in mind. Another thing that we're seeing in Idaho is just the increase in wages and compensation. I think this also lends itself to kind of the last thing that we were talking about is just that global competitiveness, or that national competitive market. So I think in Idaho, we were pretty siloed in terms of kind of the workforce that we were able to pick from. The candidates didn't have as much of that competitive market to choose from on their end as well. And so you're seeing that shift. And I think, Allie, you had mentioned this in the past. It's kind of like the housing market. The market in Idaho has gone a little bit crazy, and that includes compensation as well for employers. And so they're having to kind of hike up some of those compensation and wages to just be competitive in this market. So I think that those are a few of the things that we're seeing. Another big shift in what we're seeing as we're hiring is just the need for flexibility. I think people over the last year and a half have needed that flexibility in order to, one, stay sane. But I think it's something that is so important as people are looking for jobs, is that they know that they get that support and flexibility from their employer. And so that's something that we've never heard quite like we've heard now.
Yeah. I have to laugh a little bit at the flexibility because, here I am in my home for the day, which was not where I was planning to moderate this from, but because my kids doesn't have daycare today. So here we are in my home office. So it feels very, very poignant to me today to be moderating from home instead.
Yep. You got to do what you got to do to get the job done.
It is. Dax, on the RPO side, you work with, roles of, both on the non-exempt and the exempt side, whatever a large employer needs. What are some of the things that you're seeing some of the larger employers, either the challenges that they're trying to deal with or things that they're contending with? Does it feel the same as what Jamie talked about on the search side?
It does. Yeah. I think larger employers might be struggling a little bit more just because they've got bigger ships to maneuver. Mm-hmm. And so doing a big comp study it's more difficult, it's more time intensive, it's more expensive, both to do the study and then to adopt whatever it comes to. So with large employers, we're seeing really a big shift in they do need to be competitive nationally. Their employees are struggling with childcare, for example, right? I heard recently that 20% of childcare workers have left the industry. Like there's now a 20% shortage in childcare. And so people need to work from home, and that can be tough. So I'm seeing on the RPO side that just like Jamie's saying, flexibility, higher comp, those are all really important. And sometimes that's when TalentSpark comes in, is that we have a client that recently lost a recruiter to a remote job that was more money, and so they needed recruiting help, and we were there to assist, thankfully. But it's just tough.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I think especially it seems in some of those corporate functions where it is much easier, where your work is predominantly on the computer and the phone, whether it's IT, sales, accounting, recruiting, that are kind of easily switched to remote, that those roles have even a greater, number of options from a remote work standpoint that's increasing that competition for options. It's interesting. So we've kind of assessed like where we were, what's going on in the current market, but what do companies do? What advice can we give companies to maintain sort of their competitiveness in the market and to attract more talent? What are some of the things that you find make a difference?
Yeah, I think we've kind of mentioned compensation, flexibility. But another thing that I think people really need to keep in mind as we're working through this competitive market is just the speed at hire, the speed that you need to work at in order to get to a hire, I guess I'll say. We don't have the luxury anymore to sit around and wait. We know that there are there's a delta of almost 50,000 jobs in Idaho. And so that's how competitive the market is. And if you want to land that top quality talent, you're going to have to move way, way more quick than we have previously in the past. A little bit to the point where it's uncomfortable, just to make sure that you're landing that best talent. And then the other thing that I would say is, we can't just sit around and wait for people to apply for our jobs on Indeed or LinkedIn. And I think that is, where outside help like TalentSpark is assisting a lot of clients, is just going after some of those more passive candidates that are not out there actively looking. So I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think in addition to, or part of moving quickly, I think in the past, hiring managers and leaders, business leaders have always thought, well, I want to have 2, 3, 4 people, candidates to compare to each other, and then I'm going to pick the best one. The paradigm needs to shift where it's not which of these X number of people is the best person for the job. It's really, can this person in front of me do the job well? And if the answer is yes, like Jamie was saying, you really do need to go, because odds are they've got all sorts of options in front of them. And it's really the first one to cross the finish line that's gonna reap the reward.
Yeah, we talk a little bit in TalentSpark about going slow to go fast. And what we mean when we say that is it's so important to do that upfront work around, what is your job description? What's really important culturally that you need to succeed? What are those traits? Like I know in TalentSpark, one thing that we, really need is sort of someone with an entrepreneur mindset, because we are a small business and we've been around for 5 years. So we need to know that up front, and we need to know those qualifications, because we can't be comparing candidates to candidates. We have to compare the candidate to the job requirements, to the job description. And if you don't know what those are, it's really hard to compare. It's hard to sort of line someone up, in that space. So I think that's a good point about we've previously had the luxury, if you will, of having 2, 3 interviews and 6 or 7 candidates. And, now it might be, 2 interviews and, 1 or 2 candidates to kind of move forward. That's in that space. Jamie, you talked a little bit about passive candidates. Talk to me about the difference of like a passive candidate versus what we call an active candidate.
Yep. So, the main difference between a passive candidate and an active candidate is a passive candidate is someone that is not actively looking for a new position. Okay. So our goal at TalentSpark is to make sure that we're finding those candidates that are the best fit for the role. And they're not the ones that are out there actively looking, which is something that is very important to do, especially when there's such a low unemployment rate, because we know that the candidates just aren't out there at this point.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, we see clients come to us often after 4, 5, 6 months of having a job posted and saying, we're just not finding anyone. And my first thought is always, well, you're not looking. You're hoping that someone finds you. And this doesn't always happen, but it's not uncommon for us to spend a couple weeks on working on those jobs and finding some really great people that they're not going to spend their Saturday morning going through Indeed, because they've got other things to do. They've got a job that they're reasonably happy at. But if someone comes along and tells a compelling story, maybe they're going to be interested.
Yeah. That's great. I think those are some good points about, moving fast. You've got to do the proactive work that's beyond the job board, with unemployment at 3%, we've got to have sort of flexibility and pay. If you can hear my toddler, that, the flexibility is important, and, the pay is increasing, within that space. And I think, having that in that positive employment culture. Anything else that you guys would add about what's helpful in this market?
I think Dax had mentioned it briefly, but being able to tell a compelling story. We've all been through a lot over the last year and a half. And it even brings in kind of your point, Allie, is kind of getting your ducks in a row and be able to tell that compelling story is going to resonate more with candidates now, I think, than it ever has. So it's important to have that, that heart in there a little bit, that storytelling piece in there, to really be able to explain your company to candidates, because I think that people are looking for more than just, a job, or they're looking more than just a compensation. Those things are important. But I think the last year has taught us a lot in terms of some of those things that we weren't necessarily looking for before. So just to keep that in mind when you're out there selling your company.
Yeah, it's changed to the whole person.
Yeah.
Well, great, guys. Thank you for all your wisdom on sort of this area. And if anyone has any questions, we love talking about the market, whether you're looking for a full recruiter in there, or you just want to talk through a little bit more of the market, feel free to reach out to, any of us here at TalentSpark, and we'd love to help you or talk through any problems you may have.